Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, the channel for film reviews, discussions, and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner, joined once again with my co-host Tate in the Hour, and on today's show we'll be reviewing the biographical disaster film Everest. We're a little late to the party on this one. I think this has been out in the UK for about 2 weeks. I think it came out in the US about a week ago, but it's a film I've seen a while back, and I think that it's one that we definitely can talk about and have a discussion on, and I think it's worth having it. I think The Walk came out this week. That was the big new one, which is still a film I want to see, but for this week we're going to do Everest. So I guess we can jump straight into it. So we're going to have a spoiler-free section and a spoilers. As always, we'll warn you when we get to the spoilers.
You, my friends, are following in the very footsteps of history. Something beyond the power of words to describe. Human beings simply aren't built to function at the cruising altitude of a 747. Our bodies will be literally dying. Everest is another beast altogether.
How you doing? I'm back.
Doug Hanson.
What do you do when you're not climbing, Doug?
I deliver the mail.
First mailman on Everest?
Hope so.
I like that.
Sit down, man. Climatize.
How's the weather?
It's good.
I wish I was with you.
One day, you, me, and that little Sarah will all go climbing together.
So today's the day, huh?
It hurts. It's dangerous. Why? I have kids. They see a regular guy can follow impossible dreams. Maybe they'll do the same.
I'm on the top of Everest, Helen. We made it.
Go to Rob. There is a massive storm headed your way.
Oh no.
So, kicking off, I guess we can talk about our thoughts before seeing it. I only really sort of decided to see this film within the week that it came out, really. I'd seen... In fact, I don't think I actually saw any trailers in the lead up to it, and I think I caught a TV spot before and I thought it looked absolutely incredible. The TV spot, though, really sort of played up the whole action angle of it, showing like all the disaster itself and everyone, and I thought, oh, this might be a actually really good disaster film, so I was checking it out more for that reason. I knew it was based on a true story, but I didn't know anything about the true story. I didn't read up on it before going in. I wanted just a complete blind watch, but I know that for you it was a bit different because you watched the documentary beforehand, didn't you?
Yeah, I'd seen a documentary on YouTube beforehand. I was meant to be watching a documentary on a ski resort that I was meant to be going to, and that had a disaster of its own. But I thought, you know, this TV program's actually quite good. I'll watch a few more episodes, and one of them was the 1996 Everest disaster.
Yeah, and
so
that's basically what the film's all about. It shows you all the characters, all the main events, it goes through the actual disaster, and then sort of ends with the fallout of that, basically. That's not a spoiler, that's pretty much, you know, what you're going to get into.
That is the film, yeah.
It's a disaster movie, so it follows all the beats of that, but also it has the added effect of it being based on a true story. But I think this will be an interesting review purely because you were more knowledgeable about the whole incident before going in than I was. So I was sort of watching it in more or less from a movie perspective. I knew it was based on a true story, but I was watching it as a movie where you perhaps were watching it and comparing it at the same time to the true life events.
I kind of knew the disaster, and to be honest, I'd seen everything that I could have seen from the disaster from this 1 hour documentary, so I thought, I mean, I wouldn't have gone and seen this film unless I was doing this podcast, but in the end I thought, I'll have to watch it, won't I?
So I guess with that we can sort of sum up, so we can sum up our brief thoughts on it. I thought it was a very good film. I thought it was a very well directed, well acted, well shot movie. It's not a movie, it's not a cheerful movie by any of the stretch of the imagination, so maybe that's a factor that would sort of prevent me from watching it again. To be honest, because of that, I think it's a pretty much one and done movie. Like, there's a lot of these where I think, it was a good movie, but there's no real reason or investment for me to watch it again, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So what are some of your brief thoughts, and then we'll sort of get into the film a bit more and the actors and everything.
I didn't hate the movie. I didn't particularly like the movie. It was a very grey area for me. I think that it was well shot. I think that like the production going into it was quite good. There was not like there was no weak acting performances. It was believable, but because it was based off something that was a real life event, it made me think it just didn't settle with me right. I don't know why. With most disaster movies, you are either going to over-dramatize it or you're going to simplify it, and this one, they just nailed it on the head on what exactly happened. So I can't complain about it because it's just what happened with the event.
And I think that's going to be the same with I mentioned this before we hit record, but with The Walk, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt film coming out, there was the documentary of that beforehand, Man on Wire. So I think that might be a similar thing. If people have seen that and then see sort of a Hollywood representation of that, maybe they play up certain stereotypes in it more, or with the case of this, I assume they ramp up the action a lot more and sort of increase the stakes that way, whereas I think the documentary would be a much more sort of starker and bleaker look at what actually happened, it being like purely based on the true life stuff.
No, I'm gonna have to say this now. Both of them were very similar. It's just that with the documentary, I don't know, I just preferred the format. I just preferred the way that they had a time scale at the bottom of the screen telling you what happened at what point. You always, like, kind of knew what was happening. It was very factual. They kind of were telling you all these different facts about the mountain and stuff like that. They were telling you all the different facts about the people who were involved. And with the film, it was like a reconstruction. It was exactly like a reconstruction, and before we've even gone into the review, I personally recommend watching maybe both at the same time, just so that like you have the comparison between you and you can decide which one you'd rather watch again.
Yeah, definitely, and just from like sort of hearing your review on it, I can imagine that a documentary would probably be a better format for this particular true life story. We can get into the film a bit more though now, so we'll look at the characters first. So your main characters really, Jason Clarke, who plays Rob Hall, who was the leader, the exposition group leader. Jason Clarke has sort of really only come to the forefront for me in the last few years. I believe he was in Zero Dark 30. He was obviously in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes as well, and the god-awful Terminator Genesis, which I never want to talk about ever again. But, you know, he's a really strong actor regardless of what he's in. Even if he's in a bad movie, he's usually one of the best things in it. And I thought he played a really sort of great character in this. He plays the leader of the group, and you know he shows his leadership qualities. It's that scene, you've all seen it in the trailer, where Josh Brolin's crossing the chasm over the ladder, and something goes wrong, and you know he's the first one on the ladder and helps him back up and everything like that. So he's a likable guy. You get that bit at the start, which I think was very much needed, where it sort of highlights all of the characters and their little banter between each other and everything like that, especially with a film like this which has such a huge ensemble cast to it. Obviously being you know, an entire group going up Everest, you're going to need little moments of character like that. And I think that some people might be getting a little bit restless in the film and thinking, okay, let's get to the mountain now, let's start the climb. And I think it does sort of suffer from I'm going to call it the Peter Jackson sort of style, where it's a lot of setup at the start, and I can imagine some people getting restless and thinking, we're here to see Everest, let's get to it, you know what I mean? But I think in terms of a film like this, especially it being a true story, you do need to spend that time and devote it to the characters and sort of what makes them tick. And there's that great scene in the film, not so much a spoiler, where they're all sitting around, and I think Brolin says, so why did you want to climb Everest? And it's sort of each one of them sharing stories about why, what was in it for them and why they wanted to take on the world's tallest mountain.
Yeah, I feel like with I'd say the main three characters, with Jason Clarke, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Josh Brolin, I just say that, like, solid acting performances. I mean, there's no spoilers there or anything. They played the characters, like, they'd obviously researched the different people, and they got their personalities down to a T. Yeah, I can't complain about this film. It's weird.
Yeah, and Jake Gyllenhaal plays Scott Fisher, and he's sort of I wouldn't say a rival group leader, but he's with a part of a different company, isn't he? And he sort of
Yeah,
has that back and forth. We get the impression that he's worked with Jason Clarke's character a lot before too, and he's sort of this very easygoing, laid back. I want to say sort of like stoner kind of hippie guy, isn't he? You see him at the base
yeah,
camp,
he's
and everyone
relaxed.
else is like wrapped up warm and stuff, and he's just sort of lying on a deck chair with his shades on, like with his shirt off, just drinking. Um, and he's sort of a maverick, really, isn't he? I think for the
Yeah,
first part of the film, Jason Clarke's offering him oxygen and stuff like that, and he's like, "I don't need it. I've climbed it before without. I'm going to do it again." So right there, you sort of get the Jason Clarke character who pretty much plays by the book, likes to be safe all the time, and then you've got Jake Gyllenhaal, who's the bit of a maverick and the
yeah.
rebel and the scoundrel really out of the group.
No, yeah, that's on the tee. Completely right. I mean, with Jake Gyllenhaal's character, you immediately know as soon as you see him on screen that knowing what the disaster was, I mean, even if you had just seen the trailers, you know that that might play into something. But he is that kind of character. He's that kind of character who's like, oh no, we don't need like oxygen for my team, but then he does like accept it immediately afterwards, thinking, "Do you know what, we do have like lives at risk. We'll go up with the oxygen." But there, I believe there was another group
Yeah.
that like said no, like we won't. And in the end, just reading off like the actual event, they didn't go up in the end. They decided not to go up at all, so they completely avoided it, which is just quite interesting. I mean, like how the different characters play into like the real life situation. Be very interesting to see, like, knowing all of these actors, like this ensemble cast, what would their actual reactions be if they were the characters on the mountain, and how it would actually play out.
Yeah, definitely, and I guess that can sort of bring us on to the other big character we should probably talk about, as you said, like the main three, is Josh Brolin, and he was probably my favourite character in the film. I think out of all of them, probably besides Jason Clarke, he gets the most emotional sort of stake in it. We cut back to his wife on many occasions and his children, and we get the sense that this is just something he has to do. He says that he's climbed loads of mountains before, and while he's out there, it's his and his wife's anniversary, and he has to like call her over the satellite phone. So you do get that emotional depth there, and I really enjoyed that stuff with the character. And honestly, he was probably the one who I had the biggest emotional stake in and wanted to see him, whether he'd survive or whether he'd die on the mountain. And then to go alongside with that, Jason Clarke, his wife in it is played by Keira Knightley. I actually didn't know she was in the movie, so as soon as I sat down, she was on screen. I was like, oh wow, I didn't know she was in this movie. I guess if you're going to bring up a negative thing is she does a lot of crying, but then again, I think that was believable, and I actually thought because it's a New Zealand team, isn't it?
Yeah,
And she does a Kiwi accent. I actually thought she was really good. I've never been a huge fan of Keira Knightley, but that's mostly because the first few films I saw her in were the Pirates of the Caribbean films. But then more recently, The Imitation Game. I don't know if you've seen that with Benedict Cumberbatch. That was based on a true story as well. She was absolutely phenomenal in that role, and I think she was up for Best Supporting Actress that year as well for that film. And then again here, she doesn't have a massive role, but when she's on screen, I think she plays it really believably and quite beautifully as well.
yeah. No, that's completely fair. I'd say that I did see her on the credits when I was watching the trailer for the movie, and I thought, where is she going to play into it?
Yeah,
And do you know what? With the ensemble cast, I feel like it was okay on the mountain, but I was looking at like who was going to be in the cast before I watched the film. I thought, really, Keira Knightley? Could you not find like an actress, maybe a little bit less low key? Do we really need like? I thought that she was going to be in there just because they needed like a name to add onto the cast sheet, like just to drum up almost the hype of people going to watch the film. But in the end, I'd say that she did a pretty good performance. I wouldn't say it was probably her best performance, like that she's ever done, but that was mainly because she didn't have much screen time to kind of flesh out her character much,
yeah,
other than
definitely.
being like Jason Clarke's wife.
Yeah, and going back to your thing about like the whole casting thing, sort of how each of the actors were billed really confused me because I may be wrong here, but I swear to God, all the trailers and stuff billed Jake Gyllenhaal as the main actor in it, or at least top billing. So I went into this with the impression that he was going to be the main character we were going to follow, and sort of when we saw Jason Clarke, who I also knew was in the film, but I didn't realise he was the main guy. I was sort of like, well, where's Gyllenhaal? Like, he hasn't appeared in it yet. Is he going to be the main guy? And then, he's sort of just a side character, really. And then
Yeah.
even more of a side character is Sam Worthington, who just plays like the head of the rescue team, I guess. It's nice to see that films haven't quite forgotten about Sam Worthington yet. I remember around like the time of 2009, they were pushing for him to be like the next big thing, weren't they? He was in Avatar, he was in
Yeah.
Terminator Salvation, Clash of the Titans as well, and then following that, he's just sort of dropped off the map a little bit. But I thought he was really good in it, so I think he can be a good actor. He doesn't have a massive role in this. He's just sort of comes into it towards the end, really. But we can move away from the characters now and get sort of more into the technical side of the film, so like the cinematography and the effects. I know that the recommended viewing mode for this was in IMAX 3D. I've never actually been to an IMAX screen in my life, and I really do want to. But just seeing this, I went to see this in 2D as well. But it looked incredible on 2D, and I can only imagine what it would have looked like on a huge screen. Sort of those huge, like helicopter panoramic shots of the summit, and when they're climbing up and stuff. The cinematography is really, really beautiful in this film, and with that, obviously they didn't film it on Everest, I don't think. I know they went to Everest base camp, but in terms of everything else, I know they did a
Yeah.
lot of filming in Nepal, in Italy, and some of the stuff in Pinewood Studios as well. That might have been a few pick-up shots, or towards the end when they're on the summit and they sort of like take refuge in like a little cave sort of area cut into the mountain. I think that was definitely studio. You could sort of tell there, but before all that, the film is beautiful to look at.
Oh yeah, no, it's a pretty film. There's quite a lot of pretty films going around this year.
Yeah.
I know that they did spend quite a lot of their budget on location, just trying to get like the film crew up to base camp on Everest, because even though like you might think, oh, it's just the bottom of Everest, it shouldn't be too hard to get film crew there and stuff like that. But base camp is actually on Everest.
Mm.
You have to actually climb a little bit of Everest to get to base camp.
Mm.
I think I'm not sure whether it's 1,000 meters up or something like that, but you have to actually, it's the highest point to which you can take the helicopters and stuff like that for people who want to go, get back down. And I know towards the start of the film, this isn't really a spoiler, you actually see them walking up the first few bits of Everest, and they say, we have to train you to go up the mountain.
Yeah.
So what they do is they just kind of make them walk the first, all the way up to base camp. But other than that, they filmed in Italy. I know that they also, I think they did some filming by Kathmandu.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I'm having a look here. They did a little bit of filming in some of the Italian mountains, and all the other stuff was done in Pinewood Studios with green screen.
And fair play to the director. I'm going to attempt to pronounce his name now. I'm probably going to do it horrifically, but Baltazar Kormakur, I think his name is. Fair play to him for actually, taking them to the most part on location, even if it's not the actual location of where it needs to be. But it does make so much of a difference when you see the actors in these conditions and they are actually cold and they are in a similar environment to what it would have been like. It makes a whole load of difference. If this had just been all entirely filmed in a studio against a green screen, I think it would have definitely taken away from the film. Not just that, but for an actor, if you're on a green screen, you really, really have to be a good actor to suspend your disbelief and work in that kind of environment. But I'm always harping on practical effects and real locations against CGI. I completely understand that CGI is necessary sometimes, and as I said, this film does have the occasional moments of green screen, but because it's blended with so much stuff that's set in reality, it's almost like the intention's so much more purer, and it just works in the film, I think. And there are some sort of noticeably CGI shots here and there, but nothing too drastic to draw me out of the movie or ever have that moment where I don't believe that the characters are actually there in the first place.
Yeah, in fact, I'm reading here just a quick couple of facts. Christian Bale was meant to be playing Rob Hall.
Oh, right.
The main character, originally. but he moved on to other projects, and not only that, but whilst they actually went up to Camp 2 to start filming some of it, so they did actually have to climb part of the mountain just to do a little bit of filming. The highest they went was Camp 2, before all the other steps like Camp 4 and Hillary Step, and the summit were filmed in the 007 studio.
Oh, right.
But there was actually, this is credit to the crew and stuff like that, but in 2014, whilst on Camp 2, an avalanche struck quite close to the recording of what they were doing, and it killed 16 guides.
Oh, Jesus.
So, yeah, it just kind of shows how dangerous Everest is.
Yeah, even in
you didn't
a
want
spot
that to be...
that's meant to be safe.
Yeah, Camp 2 is reasonably safe. I mean, it's above the ice wall, but, they were saying that in the studio they had to recreate the sun, because it's really crisp up there on Everest, and it's really difficult to kind of recreate that, so they took 6 months trying to get the sun right, just in editing.
And, you know, I think it shows because there were never any sort of moments where it was technically flawed or anything like that, and I don't think it was done on a huge budget, was it? Yeah, only 55 million, so I know that filming on location is incredibly expensive, and not to mention the effects work, so how they got the results that they did from this film with such a limited budget, you know, it's absolute credit to the director and all the team and everyone involved, really. And then what you were saying about them, you know, climbing and sort of getting used to it. I was reading earlier that I'm sure everyone did, but most notably Josh Brolin and Jake Gyllenhaal actually trained and, you know, were climbing other summits in the lead up to this film to get in the right condition for it.
They are method actors, aren't they?
Yeah,
they
definitely. Yeah, I know. I think Josh Brolin isn't he? He stays in character between everything. And then I guess sort of we can move into final thoughts in a minute. I just wanted to touch on the music. The music was done by Dario Marianelli. I was never familiar with his name, but I checked his credits. He's worked on V for Vendetta, Atonement, and a few other films like that. I've seen V for Vendetta and The Warrior as well. But I really, really love the music in this. Nothing too memorable, I would say. Like, I'm not coming out of the cinema humming everything like I would with like a John Williams score or anything like that. But I think
let's just say you're not coming out the cinema humming ABBA.
No, definitely. That would have been a very, very different movie if that had a 70s soundtrack to it. But no, I think that the music really worked for it. There was some really quite beautiful moments, I think, with the score, especially at the start. But then one interesting thing I noticed was, and I don't know if you noticed this, the soundtrack just sort of like drops out of the film entirely by the time they're almost at the summit. And they're, for the most part, for like more or less the rest of the film, there is no music to be heard.
That's to add to the drama.
Yeah.
That's completely to add to the drama. Not really spoiling anything here by saying when the disaster starts, the music drops off, and that completely fits the mood.
Definitely, and usually
fits it.
Usually I wouldn't pick up on stuff like that, but I think it was because I was really enjoying and really quite loved the music at the start. The music, you know, in that shot in it, I think it was in the trailers as well. You sort of get the they look like Highland cows or like yaks, I think they are, and they walk past the camera, and like when they're first making their ascent to the summit, the music there's fantastic. And then, as you said, like when the disaster actually strikes, I don't think I even picked up on it immediately. I think it was like half hour into it after the disaster strikes, and I was like, wow, I don't think we've actually had any music for a while. And then I was paying more attention to it.
It's the sound of the wind maybe overpowering it, and I'm not sure whether they actually involved music into it.
I think the music, I'm not going to spoil anything here specifically, but I think the music probably kicks in again when there's a scene to do with Josh Brolin. And then I think from that bit onwards, I think the music kicks in. But you're right, it completely ramps up the tension, and you've got the great sound effect and sound work from the wind itself and from the mountain and the snow and everything like that. And I think that definitely does make it a lot more engaging, because you are sort of, like, if not intentionally, but you are sort of paying attention to the film a lot more and sort of in it, and like you want to see everyone get off the mountain safe, and you're with the rescue team and everything like that. So I think that the sound work or the music, and if it was his decision to cut the music completely throughout that bit, I think that was a great decision.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And then before we go into spoilers, I think we can just sum up our final thoughts really here. Not as much to talk about this film, I don't think, as like some other films we can talk about. But final thoughts for me, I think that it's a very good movie, and I would definitely recommend everyone checking it out once. I don't think it's a film that's going to get many repeat viewings or anything like that. But
I don't think it's going to air on TV.
I don't know.
No.
I could see this as, to me, this was like a big budget TV movie. Not to like make anything against the film, but I don't think it's one. Really, I don't know, because it does have the IMAX 3D thing going for it, and there are like the panoramic shots, but it's not anything that. For example, it's not like a Star Wars coming out where I'm like, I have to see this on a big screen now about 10 times. It's just like a movie that was a curiosity more than anything. If you love the actors in it, if you like Jason Clarke, Josh Brolin, Gyllenhaal or anything like that, I think it's definitely worth checking out, because I think they all turn in stellar performances. The music's beautiful, the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous, and for the most part I do think that it is a great disaster movie. If you know about the true story beforehand, then I don't know whether that will sort of mar your enjoyment of the film itself, or make you be a bit more critical of it and some of the changes they make, or some of the things they leave out or ignore completely. But I do think it's a worthwhile film. I don't know if I'd say it's one of my favourite ones of the year, but certainly from sort of like a crafting of a movie standpoint, and the crew and everything, and what you've brought up here about all the setbacks they had actually on location, I think it's definitely one of the most impressive films of the year to look at, especially because of the budget was only 55 million, and it's made a nice decent profit, I think, but it would have nice to have seen it make a little bit more, I guess.
It's almost tripled the money that it's made, and I'm pretty sure that some of the money has actually gone to the families.
Yeah, I'm sure it has.
Involved.
Yeah.
It doesn't mention it here, but I did read it somewhere that the money has gone, or some of it at least has gone to the families. However, funnily enough, one of the survivors, I won't mention their name until we get into the spoiler section, didn't like the movie, denouncing it, saying that some of the details in the movie were fabricated and stuff like that. And I know that this person did in fact like the documentary and helped do the documentary. So maybe it's him being a little bit negative that he wasn't involved in the making of the movie, or the way that he was like portrayed in the movie. But personally, my review is go watch the documentary first on YouTube, because then you get to know the characters maybe as actual people before you reference them as characters. You actually find out a bit more about what happened, gives you a bit more knowledge, and then you can possibly watch the dramatization of it.
Yeah, definitely. And, with any film that comes out like this, if it's based on a true story, quote unquote, you know that there are going to be changes made. You know there are going to be, not fabrications, but I think things can be played up a bit more, because it is a completely different medium. A documentary, for the most part, based itself in fact, and from a very sort of distant and unbiased way, whereas a film, it is a visual storytelling, so I do think a few changes have to be made here and there. You know that any true story that comes out isn't going to be 100% faithful to the actual occurrences, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think it still makes it a solid film on its own right. Just be prepared before going in that you're not in for a very cheery movie, and when the credits roll, you are going to be feeling a bit like, oh wow, that was heavy, and it's not. You're not going to get much enjoyment out of it in terms of the ending or anything like that, but I think it's definitely still a worthy film to watch. So with that said, now we'll move into our spoiler section. Not a whole lot to talk about really, but we can go into a few of the scenes in the film and a few of the actual events that happen a bit more. I think what we've probably got to start off with is the deaths of the characters. And Jason...
Can I quickly, just before that, I'll now tell you guys which character is the one who disowned the movie.
Oh, yeah, go for it, yeah.
That was Krakauer, the journalist played by Michael Kelly.
Yeah. I think I heard about this, not too much, but I don't know many of the details about it, so if you want to sort of like bring that up and go into that a bit more.
First of all, as soon as the disaster happened on set with the 16 guides dying on the mountain, slightly further up from where they were in Camp 2, he said that now is not the right time to be filming this film and they should stop production now. At that point, he was kind of excluded from like being involved in the film as they wanted to go ahead with the studio. And not only that, but he was saying that John Krakauer actually made a book which is actually quite acclaimed for this disaster called Into Thin Air. It was best-selling at the time. I mean, it was released 1 year after the actual disaster, and it details the events of what happened beforehand, what happened on the mountain. Basically, what we have, the material for this film came from that book. But apparently in the writing of the film, they didn't actually use any of his accounts. They didn't use any of his material. They were saying that his alleged version of events conflicted with the plot, and that led to him being extremely angry at like the film and how it was shot.
Well, with the whole thing about not wanting to film, I get that, but I would assume that that's the studio machine. You know, they're on a schedule;
Yeah.
they need to get it done, and with any setbacks like that, that would take money
It
out
was
of
quite
their
late in
pockets.
production, so this film was released June 23rd this year.
Yeah.
And the disaster happened like last year on the mountain. So I just it wouldn't have. It isn't really. They would have already filmed most of the film.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to say.
it totally wouldn't have been feasible, I don't think, to delay it anymore, and especially with all the effects work that would have had to have gone into it and stuff like that. You were saying about like the lighting effects and everything
Yeah.
like that. At that stage, I think you've just got to go for it. But yeah, character deaths. The main one really for me that shocked me was Jason Clarke's character. As I said, when I went to see this film, I knew absolutely zero facts about this actual story. So I went to see it, and how it was sort of portrayed as a film. And the bit where he gets stranded at the top of the mountain, and probably one of my favourite scenes in the film is where they get his wife, played by Keira Knightley, on the phone to sort of motivate him and get him moving and try and make his descent back down to safety. I thought this was going to be an inspiring story about a guy who got trapped on the summit during a horrible, horrible storm, but he beat the odds and through sheer will and force managed to get back down to safety. It really, really, really wasn't that kind of movie, and so I think they try and call him a second time, don't they, as well?
Yeah.
And at that stage they say, we can't get the helicopters up to you. You're going to have to try and wait another night, but they all know that he won't physically make it another night. You can hear him on the phone, and he's delirious, and he's sort of, just completely out of it already. So at that stage of the film, and then that was sort of cemented at the very end, where Keira Knightley's waiting for everyone, and then, her husband's not there, and it comes up at the end. I was like, oh wow, I was expecting this to be sort of an inspirational survival story about a guy who beat the odds, but it really didn't turn out like that, and that took me by surprise at the start. Obviously that wouldn't have been the same for you because you knew about it, but if I'm going in as sort of a casual movie fan as I was, just going to see this film, I think that would sort of take people aback a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was quite a big shock at the end. I mean, even for me, I was thinking, oh yeah, okay, I remember the phone call now. And I actually think that, the film may have actually slightly spoiled the ending with the trailers. I know it's been a theme this year with films such as Genesis and stuff, but in the trailer you see him calling his wife. From the documentary, that is the main kind of event that happened. That is the end of the documentary, saying like that phone call and stuff like that, and that is the main drama that happened on the mountain other than the deaths. That is the way that like we know where he was on the mountain, like, and like how he died. If that phone call didn't happen, then I don't think this movie would have happened.
No.
Because he wouldn't have been the main character in the story. It probably would have been Josh Brolin's character instead. It was the whole drama between him calling back base camp and calling his wife and stuff like that, which kind of made the end of the movie, and I feel like that may have been spoiled in the trailers by showing him calling his wife.
Definitely, and what you were saying there about the Josh Brolin character as well, I mean, this could have been a film about him as well, because as I said earlier, Josh Brolin and Jason Clarke both do share the sort of emotional side to it when they're calling back home, and it flashes to their characters back at home trying to get someone to them, and everything like that, and Josh Brolin surviving was a big shock for me as well. because there's a part where he's having problems with his eyesight, so Jason Clarke's not comfortable with taking him up to the summit and says, "Wait here, I'll come back down for you." And he goes up to the summit with him. They stay past the time they should when their bracket in the safe zone was now up and the storm was on its way. And there's long stretches where it doesn't cut back down to Josh Brolin. It keeps cutting back to him, and he's again like delirious, and he's saying like he's coming back down to come back and get me. And I mean, this was hours after the fact, so I was thinking, yeah, there's no chance he's going to make it because people coming down from the summit weren't taking him down with them or anything like that. And then he gets caught in exposure with another one of the characters I haven't actually mentioned. She's sort of a side character, but she's a character I really liked. Naoko Mori, who plays a character called Yasuko Namba. And in the film, it says that she's climbed all of the other summits, and Everest is the only one she hasn't. So she wants to sort of do this to cross off her bucket list, and then she's done. And then when she actually gets to the summit at the end, and touches the stone at the end, it's really quite an emotional moment. And I think the actress plays it really beautifully, where she sort of like breaks down in tears out of accomplishment at what she's done. And she gets caught in exposure with Josh Brolin. She doesn't make it through it. And for the most part, it does a good job because it cuts back to the team that actually did make it down and said, like, yeah, he didn't survive because he was up there. And then later in the film, he sort of has this epiphany or like vision of his wife motivating him to, get up and try and survive, similar to Jason Clarke, really, when he calls on the mobile to his wife. And, he's got all frostbite and everything like that, and he does make it out. In terms of other deaths, the ones that not so much shock me, but when he goes up to the summit at the end, towards the end, Jason Clarke with that other guy, it's when I forgot the other guy's name, I apologise, but he just sort of falls off the mountain. He tries to like get along that, he tries to shimmy along that bit of the mountain, and then there's no music swell or anything. It's done from a really sort of distant, shocking way where he just collapses off the mountain into nothingness. There's no sound or anything. And that really shocked me as well. And I think that when it does get to those emotional moments in the film and sort of where the bad stuff does start happening, people start dying, I think it does it in a very, very effective way. And then that sort of hit home at the end with the text crawl that comes up when it says that none of the bodies have actually been located or, brought back.
Yeah. No, that bit was actually quite interesting because I feel like for the character itself, it was more of a delirious kind of moment where he was asked to stay there and he knew if he was left up there, he was dead. So he had to try something, and because he was already basically knocked out, as soon as he steps up, music goes quiet, and it's just that moment where Jason Clarke's character turns back around a second later and realizes that he's not there anymore, knowing, okay, he's got to push on now.
Yeah.
He's got to get back down as soon as possible. And in fact, there was a moment in the film where I already knew what had happened in the documentary. I already knew who died, who didn't die. But there was a moment in the film where he meets up with the guy who, the guy at the top, I genuinely can't remember his name. I know that you can't as well. But,
I'm just checking here. It's
Guy Cotter, is it? No?
There's Doug Hansen. He was the mailman, wasn't he?
Doug Hansen. That sounds
that's
right,
the actual guy. He's played by an actor called John Hawkes. Yeah.
Yeah. Him, the mailman. He says he wants the summit and he's not coming back next year. Now, Jason Clarke's character already knows it, and you can see it in his eyes. He's trying to think, can we do a second summit? I know it's really late and stuff, but can we do it? And at that moment, you can basically tick both their names off onto, you can just say, okay, that's where it happened. That's where the disaster really kicked in. Which is less of a flaw to the film, but maybe more of a what actually happened at the disaster, and maybe a calculation of risk upon the actual people involved. But yeah, this film was really depressing.
Yeah, it is. But credit to the film as well. And although, I haven't said this is a bad film by any stretch. I just said that I don't think it merits repeat viewings as much as other films this year would have.
No.
But there were moments where I was watching this film and I was sort of like sighing in the film not out of boredom, but out of like Christ, what these people must have gone through. I think it does an effective job of allowing the viewer to sort of put themselves in the same situation and imagine what these people actually went through. And I think that the film, as we said, like being filmed on location and the sound and everything, it really does give an effective picture of what Everest would have been like, and you almost feel like you're on this journey with the characters from the base camp all the way up to the summit.
Yeah.
I guess before we close out, we can talk about a favourite scene if we have one in particular. Mine, as I mentioned earlier, would probably be the phone call home. I think that scene, as you were saying, is probably the main scene from the main occurrence from the true story. But I think that both Jason Clarke and Keira Knightley played it absolutely beautifully, and really at the crux of it, I think that scene was the emotional core of the entire film. And from that scene onwards, everything and all the emotional scenes that follow that are sort of anchored around that one incident. So that would probably be my favourite moment of the film.
I would have to say, expanding on that moment, I would say all of the scenes involving the people back at base camp, listening into the stuff that's happening on the mountain, trying to figure out where everyone is, trying to launch rescue attempts, and you can see it on the actors and actresses' faces. As soon as the second time they say, okay, we can't send a team up, we can't send a helicopter up, you can see, I can't remember the actress's name, but she goes off crying and, like, is really emotional at that point. I believe it's...
Is that the medic?
Emily Watson.
Yeah.
No, the person who played the coordinator, the person who played
right.
Worthington.
Yeah.
And you can see that moment. She is just like, oh, we've tried everything. We've got to send somebody else up, but she knows that there is nothing they can do. Because they'd be putting more lives at risk. And you can just see it in her face. The emotion. And I like that scene. It's a good scene.
Yeah, totally, and I think I've pretty much said everything I can on Everest, really. To sum up again, I think, would you recommend the film to someone?
No. I recommend the documentary over the film. Because the film is really depressing, and it's very good kind of representation of what actually happened. But I lost the characters' names all the way through the film.
Yeah, and that was evident here as
well.
The
fact that I'm referring to them to characters right here, right now, I lost the people's names in the film.
Yeah.
Because some points in the film, everyone's wearing all these kind of, like, snowsuits and stuff like that. It's really difficult to tell who is who.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even before we started talking about this, we both said, look, we actually have to go back through and look at, like, part of the Wikipedia to see which characters survived and which characters didn't make it. Because in some areas there was confusion.
Yeah, definitely, and I think part of that is because the ensemble cast is fairly huge as well, and there are moments where, they'll refer to the character by their name once, and then you're just sort of expected to know them throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah.
I don't know how effectively they could have changed that, though, with the sheer amount of cast members they had, but I will agree with that, and even now, like, we were struggling to think of, certain characters like John Hawkes playing Doug Hansen, the mailman. Like, I couldn't remember his name at all.
No.
And that's evident through this review as well. We've just been referring to the characters by the actors that play them, so I do think that was probably a fault of the film. I would recommend the film as a one-time viewing. If you're sort of a casual moviegoer who likes to go to sort of the, like the Marvel movies or the sort of popcorn films, I really don't think this will be a film for you. If you've seen the trailer and you're curious and you're expecting some kind of uplifting disaster movie, I don't think this will be for you either. I would recommend either watching the documentary first so you have a bit of knowledge before going into it, or I think if you are like just a hardcore film fan and you'll go and see anything regardless, I think you will like this movie. I think it's, as I said earlier, a beautifully crafted, well-directed, well-acted movie. There's just something about it which I don't know would bring me back to a second viewing of it, although I wouldn't be opposed to it if it did. But as you said, it's not a very uplifting movie, so be prepared for that if you are going in to see it.
Maybe it's just... I feel like it may be like the sense of helplessness.
Yeah, I think that
Because
definitely plays a lot into it.
You can see the different mistakes that happened on the mountain. You can see the different, like, things that went wrong, like the gas tanks being half full. You can see all this and you think, what if it was slightly different?
Yeah.
And that's all you can think about from the film. What happened? What would have happened if this happened instead? Or what would have happened if they turned back? And it's difficult because you're playing with the idea of playing with people's lives. Which makes it so depressing.
Yeah, and the film does a good job of that sort of ticking clock as well. With the storm and encroaching slowly and everything like that. So it does an effective job of that. The suspense is all the way through it. But as you said, like, you can definitely sort of like pick apart all the flaws and what actually happened and how maybe they could have survived if there were a few different things that happened. But I would recommend the movie, but as I said, be prepared before going into it. And if anything, it's sort of just cemented in my mind that I never, ever, ever want to try and climb Everest in my entire life. It's not worth it.
Rob, can you hear me? You've got to get moving. You've got to come on down.
There's no oxygen. You go. I'm done. No, I'm not leaving you behind. Come on. It's gonna take all we got. We're all getting down together. Now let's go.
If anyone can make it, you can.
But yeah, that was our review on Everest, so be sure to rate, like, comment, subscribe. Have you seen Everest? Will you be seeing Everest? Let us know. I think it's still in the theatres now, so I think people can probably still catch it. Before we close out our show for today, we always end on recommended movie.
Is it depressing?
I don't know, because I'm actually nominating a film this week that I've never seen before. But how recommended movie works is that at the end of our main show of whatever we've reviewed, each week we take it in turns, nominating a film for our smaller midweek show film club. The film that we nominate has to sort of tie in vaguely or through an actor or director or whatever link to the film we reviewed today. So we reviewed Everest today, and it's my turn to pick. So the film I've actually gone for, the link I've gone with, is through a Jake Gyllenhaal link. There's a few films of his I've never seen. And most recently, one that's got a lot of hype and a lot of people were talking about at the time, saying how great his performance was in it. And I think he was snubbed for an Oscar for this as well. It's Nightcrawler, a film I've never seen. I don't know much about. I know that Jake Gyllenhaal plays a murderer in it or something like that, or a psychopath. So
You'll enjoy it then, because you've got it completely wrong.
Oh, have I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I went on Wikipedia and I saw that it's a neo-noir crime thriller, and that's all I needed to see. So Nightcrawler will be the one that we'll review this week. That will be up Thursday. Have you seen Nightcrawler before? Or?
I have seen Nightcrawler before. In fact, I've watched it twice.
Is it better than
Once in
Prometheus?
cinema, once in DVD. When you said that he was snubbed for the Oscar, I completely agree. I feel like he may have been in the running for Best Actor.
Yeah.
And you'll see that when you watch the film or watch our review.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Definitely, it's one of those ones that came out, I think it was last year at the Oscars, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of those where I always do a really bad job of catching up with all the Oscar films when they come out, because there's just so many and they all come out at the same time. So even like years after the fact, I'm trying to catch up. But I'm definitely looking forward to that one. So that will be up Thursday. As I said, be sure to rate, like, comment, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook. You can find us at facebook.com/cinemasavvy. We're on Twitter at twitter.com/cinema_savvy. And we're also on letterboxd.com at letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy, which is a great site. You can find out all the films we've done. It's a good list, and you can keep track of everything we've done or will be reviewing, so definitely check that out. And be sure to come back Thursday, where we'll be reviewing Nightcrawler. So until then, thanks for listening.